Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Strictly Stalking is a true crime podcast that explores stalking stories told by the survivors in their own words.
Join us every Tuesday as we interview survivors, advocates, and experts to give you a deep dive into the workings of a stalking case.
Would you know where to turn if you or someone you know is being stalked? We'll also give you the resources to fight back, know your rights, and get justice.
Find Strictly Stalking wherever you listen to podcasts from Podcast One.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, along a beautiful stretch of roadway, tragedy lurks. Why are so many women murdered on the highway of tears? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my driven co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. I'm so proud of you whenever you adopt my love of connections and not a pun, but we care about our words. And this is so apt because what do you do on a highway? You drive.
You drive on it.
And hopefully don't get murdered, which
Yes,
unfortunately
exactly.
is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm very proud of you, Brett. You've grown up so much.
Alice, I try to learn from you and be a better podcaster because of it. And you're so good at tying the descriptors in to whatever the subject is. I want to be more like you, so I'm going to try and do that more often. And you are driven, so it's perfect. It's a good descriptor for you, and it ties in the case. And I would just say, some of the descriptors you use for me aren't always that good for me. Whereas this one is both true and it's positive and it's tied in the case. So
That's
I'm pretty
the
proud of
positive
myself.
one. That's the positive part that you really struggle with.
Exactly.
But thank you,
well,
Brett.
You're welcome.
And for those of you who haven't hung around long enough, Brett always makes fun of me for how I do too much. I know I do too much. I'm tired, and it's because of me. So I'm gonna try to put a foot on the brakes.
There you go, Alice. I love it. Alice, she will never put the foot on the brakes because she is an amazing mom, an amazing lawyer, an amazing podcaster. And it's not like it's easy every day, but she gets through the tough times and keeps on keeping on, and we love her for it.
Well, thanks for those nice words. And, speaking of women who are so much to their families, I really am so glad, all jokes aside, I'm so glad we are covering the Highway of Tears today, because this will not be the first time that we've covered the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, except this time this is a stretch of highway in Canada that faces very similar issues that we see here in the United States. And sadly, I wish this was something that was only regional, but it's something that we see over and over. Vulnerable populations being forgotten, perhaps, and very little answers for family members. And here, I hope we can shed a little bit of light on these women, this area, and kind of this population as well, if you have not heard about this before.
And in some ways, this stretch of roadway is kind of unique, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons that it's particularly dangerous, but it is just a fact that interstates and highways are places where you tend to see more people going missing, more people murdered. There have been serial killers who the highways were their hunting ground, and you see that quite often. If you guys have seen The Killing Season, I believe it's called, it's a documentary. It starts off about Lisk, but at some point it starts to talk about serial killers in general. And one of the things they do is they sort of follow the interstates and talk about how you will see strings of murders along the interstate highways in the United States. Obviously, we're not in the United States today. We're going up to Canada, but this is a similar place where you see murders happening along a stretch of roadway for lots of different reasons we're going to get into. And this is in British Columbia in Canada, and it has long been known for breathtaking landscapes, rugged nature, and a true sense of wilderness. But this same vast wilderness that makes British Columbia one of the most beautiful places in the world has also created something much more sinister, a hunting ground for murderers. And we want to give a shout out to the hueandcry.com, which is a great website. If you're interested in this topic when we get finished, we're only going to scratch the surface. 1 or 2 episodes, not sure how long we're going to spend on this, but we'll only scratch the surface. It's a great website, and you guys will learn a lot about these cases. And if you really want to dig into some of these, you can find that there. And we also want to thank Madison, who is the newest member of our team, our new researcher who helped us put this together. Thank you, Madison. Madison does an awesome job and works really hard. So I'm very happy to have her along.
She kind of has adopted Brett's prolificness with reading all these books in order to understand the lay of the land before she even dives into the case. So she is a very welcome member of our team. Yeah,
she told me she was reading all these books for one of these cases, and I was like, well, don't bankrupt us. She didn't, but she's great, and we're very glad to have her along. So that's sort of the setup for this. British Columbia in Canada. And we have a stretch of roadway called the Highway of Tears, which is a term coined in 1998 by Florence Niziel. But it refers to an isolated 724 kilometer, because we're in Canada, we have to use the weird measurements, 450 miles for those of you in the United States, stretch of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, Canada. And this is, if you think of British Columbia, particularly those of us in the United States, we always think of everything on the border with the United States. When we think of Canada, it's basically like Vancouver over here and Toronto and Montreal, and then just the Great White North. Anything north of that is basically complete wilderness. Well, this is pretty far north in this part of Canada, a good bit north of Vancouver, and it is an area where there aren't a lot of people. There, as we're going to talk about, there's things like cell phone service are often lacking. And you've got this long stretch of highway that people are often traveling, and it has created this perfect storm. And it's not just that it's isolated. It also happens to be situated amongst many of the Native American reserves in Canada, and we have seen over a period of decades numerous women and girls, and mostly from indigenous communities, have gone missing or been murdered. We're going to talk about a lot of people who have been murdered. We're going to talk about a lot of people who have disappeared. And this, we decided to do it this way because we want to talk about these cases, but unfortunately, and I don't know if it's because of when some of these crimes happened, if it's because of who the victims are, if it's because of where it is, there is vanishingly little information on a lot of these cases. And one thing as we go through this, which would be nice, if you guys out there, a lot of people who listen are podcasters or journalists or just ordinary people, if one of these cases, if you really are touched by it, you know, you could be the person who digs into this and finds a ton of information that's never been discovered before. These are cases that a lot of them, many of them, are unsolved, and you just wonder if somebody took one and really ran with it, what they could do.
That's a really good point, Brett. And, you know, oftentimes we'll get requests for cases from people who want us to cover something, and we'll look into it and we just say, we're really sorry. There's not enough resources. There's just not enough to cover. We've said, you know, time and again, we're not an investigative podcast because we have day jobs and we just don't have the time to fly to these places, do, you know, firsthand interviews. But this case was different because of kind of the issue that we'll talk about that faces a lot of these populations, that unless someone talks about it and starts looking into it, it kind of becomes a repeating problem. No one's going to look into it. And so even though there's so little information, we don't have like a beautiful timeline like we do in most of our cases because we just don't know what happened. We still wanted to cover the women that we do know about, as much as we know about it, to hopefully give you guys a starting point to learn more about this, to be an advocate for, you know, women, Indigenous women, and also kind of these more rural places as well that don't have resources to be able to make these cases international news. So with that said, let's talk about this area. There are 23 First Nations reserves along the stretch of Highway 16. These areas are plagued by high poverty rates and limited access to resources, including hospitals, universities, and work opportunities that are typically found in larger cities. This is the case here. It's the case with kind of a lot of the tribes in the United States as well. But I think what's really special about this area is just how wild and rural the terrain is. It makes a lot of things harder. If you've been to this area of the world, not only, you know, it really feels like nature against you, and then pile on top of that the poverty and the lack of resources, it really compounds even more. And there's another unique problem with this area, and that's the lack of public transportation. It's forced Indigenous women and girls to rely on, unfortunately, hitchhiking as a main source of transportation because they have to get places. It is not a walking, 450 miles is not exactly walking distance. And sometimes they have to go places, to go to the store, to go visit people, to get jobs or interviews, anything. And if they don't have access to their own transportation, then they have to rely on passerbys to pick them up and just hope that they are going to be well-meaning people. The murders and disappearances along the Highway of Tears is a microcosm of a larger issue in Canada and the United States. Indigenous women and girls go missing at a rate far higher than the rest of the population. And in addition to that, their cases are often overlooked by authorities and many remain unsolved to this day. We've previously talked about this, and there are a lot of factors that go into this, from kind of jurisdictional issues to the fact that when you have vulnerable populations, young women, people of First Nations in Canada, there's not as much visibility into kind of the broader culture. And so people don't seize on it. They may not know how to get their names out there. And it becomes a perpetual problem. And it continues and snowballs. In response to the growing number of missing and murdered women along Highway 16, the RCMP organized a conference in 1981 where 40 police detectives from British Columbia and Alberta got together to discuss the unsolved cases of murdered and missing women along Highway 16 and other highways in interior British Columbia. This conference, known as the Highway Murders Initiative, did help to shed light on certain similarities among cases occurring between 1981 and 2005, and even helped identify suspects. But unfortunately, it did little to stop the murders. In fact, the murders continued at an alarming rate. And the fact that this conference took place in 1981 and we're now 40 years past that tells you how kind of enduring problem this is. And this is not new, and it's also not getting better.
And I think it also tells you how big of a problem it had become, because 1981, not exactly a time period where people were focused on this issue. There's been a lot more focus on this issue lately. But obviously the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they were seeing this. Local jurisdictions were overwhelmed. And I think there was really a feeling that we've got to do something. And it was a good start, but it took a while for them to take it to the next level. In 2005, the RCMP again took action to try and get control of the situation along Highway 16. And they created Project E-Pana. E is the division of the RCMP over British Columbia, and Pana is an Inuit goddess. And so they created this project to investigate cases of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in the area. There's a great article about this on the Highway of Tears by Don Sabo. We will link to it. You can check it out. And he writes that the RCMP, they use 3 criteria when reviewing the cases of missing and murdered women to determine whether they should be included in the project. And those 3 criteria are: the victim was involved in a high-risk activity that would expose them to danger, such as hitchhiking or being involved in a street trade. This could be sex work. It could be drugs of some sort. So that's the first thing, high-risk activity. Second thing, the victim was last seen or their body was discovered within 1 mile of British Columbia Highway 16. In 2007, this was broadened to include Highways 97 and 5, which run off of 16. And they were female. So the primary thing that we're looking at here are Indigenous women, some sort of risky behavior right along this stretch of roadway.
And using this criteria, initially the RCMP identified 9 victims who fit the criteria that went missing or were murdered along Highway 16. However, once the geographic area was expanded to include a longer stretch of Highway 16, as well as portions of Highway 97 and 5, as Brett had mentioned, 9 additional victims were added to the list. In total, the RCMP acknowledges 18 victims who had gone missing or been found murdered along the Highway of Tears from 1969 to 2006. 10 of the 18 identified victims are Indigenous women or girls. And if this number seems a little low to you for a period of time that spans almost 40 years, it's because it probably is. According to Sabo, several Indigenous groups have criticized the criteria used by the RCMP and believe that this number is misleading because it reflects only the disappearances and murders that have happened in a specific geographic area around the highways. And they said that if you really did the investigation into this population of what's happening, the real number is going to be something that exceeds 40 missing and murdered women. Now, this is one of those cases where there's just not enough information to spend an entire episode on just one victim. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the 18 victims that the RCMP acknowledge in Project E-Pana, of course, knowing that this is probably about maybe half of the women who could fit in this category, but because they're not part of this project, we just don't know enough about them. So what we can do is shed light on this, maybe have it expanded, and create an avenue for more people to research the other women and also the 18 that we're going to talk about today. So, as we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, if you hear anything that rings a bell, please contact the RCMP. And if there's a case you hear that you'd like us to expand on and there's not enough information to do so, we'll try in a future episode. Basically, activate all of you who may know something in those areas and call on you to help do some research on the ground.
And look, I just want to warn you guys, we're about to go through this, and reading through this is tough. You know, usually we focus on one victim, and that's hard enough. But you just read this list of people, and it's just one woman after another, and you're reading sort of this short synopsis of what happened to them, how they disappeared, how they were murdered, how their bodies were found. And it's tough. And so this is going to be probably a little bit more difficult episode to listen to than maybe some of our others, but we think it's important, and we did want to focus on these as much as possible. So we're going to talk about these victims, and we're going to talk about them in chronological order. As we said, Hue and Cry has a lot of great stuff on this. There are good resources on various sort of compendiums online, whether it's RCMP's website, the Canadian Encyclopedia, Hue and Cry, and we're going to give you a shortened version of that. Oftentimes, Hue and Cry, for instance, will have a little bit more, but we're trying to give you a capsule, I guess, of each of these cases. And we're going to start all the way back on October 25th, 1969, with Gloria Moody. And Gloria was 27 years old when the event occurred. She was on vacation in Williams Lake with her family at the time of her disappearance. Gloria and her brother Dave went to several bars in town. Dave was ready to head back to the hotel room so he left the bar, assuming that Gloria was right behind him. But when he turned around to talk to her, she was nowhere to be seen. Gloria's body was discovered the next day by some hunters 10 kilometers west of Williams Lake. She had been stripped naked, beaten, and sexually assaulted. In the end, she bled to death. Gloria's murder is believed to be the first case of a murder of an indigenous woman on what would come to be known as the Highway of Tears. And today, 60 years later, almost 60 years later, her murder remains unsolved.
Oh, how devastating. You know, you always say you'll be safe if you're out and about in a group or with a man in your group. And here she's with a man she trusts, her brother, you know, of all people. And she could have been taken really just right from under her nose. Shows you the boldness also of these crimes. And this is just the first, unfortunately, of the 18 we're going to go through, but you'll see the brutality that is the theme that runs through all of these.
And you're right. And that's another thing about them. And you will notice that as we talk about these. The boldness of these killers. I mean, these killer, serial killers, we don't know, but this is not the only case where someone seems to be just snatched and disappears into thin air. So the next person, Micheline Pear. The date of her disappearance, July 1970. She was 18 at the time. The exact date of her disappearance is actually unknown. She was last seen hitchhiking in the Hudson Hope area of BC sometime in July 1970. 2 women reported dropping her off at the gates of Tompkins Ranch between Fort St. John and Hudson's Hope. That is the last confirmed sighting of her alive. On August 8th, 1974, her body was found 21 kilometers away by blueberry pickers along the highway. She had been beaten with a blunt weapon, and although her body was too badly composed to confirm, given that was 4 years later, it is believed that she had been sexually assaulted. Her murder is also unsolved.
And perhaps for anyone who doesn't know the dangers of hitchhiking, and this is still, 50 years ago? And obviously, I think in the 1970s, the prolificness of some of these violent murders were known to more people. But hitchhiking obviously opens you up to the kind of person who will stop. Maybe it will be a Good Samaritan, but oftentimes they are people who are looking to take advantage of someone who is in a vulnerable position. You're usually hitchhiking because you lack the resources to travel in another way. And it also means that people are probably not waiting for you at a specific time. Because if you're depending on hitchhiking, then it's very hard to make definite plans. I'll meet you at 11 o'clock on this day. Probably not going to make it, might not. But at least those with ill will stopping to pick you up have the knowledge that if you were to show up an hour late, maybe a few hours late, maybe a few days late, maybe even a week late, no one might notice for a while, which allows the person who wants to do ill will to do the bad, dump the body, and disappear well before anyone can even know that the person, something terrible has happened. And we see that here with Micheline's case. No one can even pinpoint the day in which she disappeared. We have vaguely a month and a year, and that's based on, some people who may or may not remember specifically when that was. And so and there's lots of reasons that people hitchhike, especially in this area. And sometimes that's the only option that you have. But in case you didn't know why, just how dangerous it is, that, hopefully gives you an insight into it.
And there are famous signs along this stretch of roadway to this day. And they read, "Girls, don't hitchhike on the Highway of Tears. Killer on the loose." And the only thing that's wrong with that sign is it's not just one killer. And that's what's disturbing about this. We're going to talk about a couple people who are responsible for some of these murders, but there are multiple killers. And I think the reason they know that this is an area where potential victims are plentiful, where it's easy to get them into a vehicle, at which point they are completely within your control. And it's unlikely anybody's going to ever figure out what you did, because many of these cases, 50-something years later, are still unsolved. And that's why it surprises me, frankly, that we don't talk about this more in true crime, because this whole thing, this Highway of Tears thing, is really stark and really tragic and needs more attention. And I think it's getting more attention now. I think the Canadian government is giving it a lot more attention than it used to. But still, given what you see here, it's surprising that there's not more focus on it. So many unsolved murders and such a terrifying place. It is like something out of one of those old urban legends, right? The guy with a hook or the guy in the back seat of your car. It's that this area is that sort of come to life.
And, some people ask because this is a 1970 case, well before cell phones, pay phones even. There's no pay phones out there. We'll talk more about cell phone coverage. But some people have also asked, is hitchhiking still predominant? Was this just a problem in the 70s because people didn't know? I don't know about you, Brett, but I see hitchhikers all the time. In the routes that I drive, because we live around several pretty big highways that connect interstates that connect a lot of states. And I often see hitchhikers, and I've seen many people stop and pick them up. Now, I have not seen a woman hitchhiker in recent memory. They've mostly been men, where I live, at least. But yes, I would say that hitchhiking is still something that's used. It's illegal, but it's still used, and certainly in places hard to prosecute because it's just put your thumb down when you see like a cop going by. I was just giving someone a thumbs up, so it's kind of a hard crime to get and prosecute. And the reason it's a crime is really for your protection. It's not, because it's kind of, like vandalism where it's bad for the public. It's more for your protection.
I picked up a hitchhiker once.
No, you did not.
I did.
Are you kidding me?
Absolutely did.
Good God. Okay, before you tell your story, which you obviously have to, and I know you were itching to tell it, the danger's not just to the hitchhiker. The danger's to the person who's picking up the hitchhiker.
Yeah. I was driving back from a football game. It was really late. It was like really late at night. And it was me and my girlfriend at the time, who is not Mrs. Brett. And I picked up this hitchhiker, which really made my girlfriend mad. She didn't like that I did that. But it was a lady. She was walking down the road. She had an Alabama shirt on, so obviously she wasn't a threat. And I took her to her house and dropped her off. Didn't die. It was fine. She didn't die because I didn't do anything. So that's my hitchhiking story. Short.
Don't ever do that again. Don't ever do that again. I did not know that you picked up a hitchhiker before. Goodness gracious.
Whatever.
And that's a great way to bait someone, is to wear a Bama shirt after a Bama game. Goodness gracious, Brett.
Well, it worked. It worked. And she got home and everything was fine. So
oh my goodness.
All's well that ends well.
It's not all's well for a lot of these victims.
Hitchhikers. Anyway, so let's go to Gail Ways. October 19th, 1973. She was 19 years old. And Gail was last known to be hitchhiking from Clearwater to Kamloops. Her body was found in a ditch 11 kilometers south of Clearwater in April 1974. This case has never been declared solved, but we are pretty sure that a serial killer named Bobby Jack Fowler, whose name is going to come up a lot more, he's considered a strong suspect in her death for lots of different reasons. And I don't know why they haven't cleared it, frankly. If you read some articles about this case, a lot of people don't really understand it. There's some thoughts that maybe a lot of the evidence wasn't well preserved, and so while there's strong evidence, it's not enough for them to say he definitely did it, but he definitely did it. And we're going to hear his name some more. We're going to talk about him some more, but at least that is a case that has been solved. The next case is Pamela Darlington, November 6th, 1973. She was 19 when she was murdered. Pamela was last thought to have been hitchhiking to a bar in Kamloops at the time of her murder. Little is known about where she went that evening, but her body was found in a park the next day. There were rumors she was seen at the bar with a good-looking guy with shaggy hair, leading her family to believe she was killed by someone that she knew who died by suicide soon thereafter. This is not unusual, actually. Murders happen. A lot of times people can't live with it, and they'll kill themselves. But this is likely not the case. She was sexually assaulted and beaten to death, and she is also suspected to be another victim of Bobby Jack Fowler. His DNA was eventually found on her body, and I don't think that is a coincidence. I think she was probably murdered by him.
Okay. It only gets harder to go through each of these victims because, again, you just see the brutality of this. And also you see that if they were hitchhiking, they didn't make it far at all. And this goes to the boldness of the killers as well. Like with Gail, she was likely murdered at the very beginning of her hitchhiking journey, right? She never even made it out of clear water, it appears, based on where her body was found. And also with Pamela, she was just going out for a good time, meaning she may have even made it to a place where there were other people around. And still, that wasn't enough to keep her safe. The next victim on this list of 18 is Monica Ignis, and she was only 14 at the time that she disappeared. And Monica was last seen on December 13th, 1974, walking along Highway 16 toward the direction of her home in Thornhill. There were witnesses who also reported seeing a man and a girl pulled off the highway that same night. Her body was found on April 6th, 1975, off a densely wooded service road, and it was determined that she'd been strangled with her own clothes. Oh, so young. And she's not the only young girl.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of these girls are very, very young.
And part of that may be kind of the ability to take risks as you think nothing bad will happen to you. But also, as we know, young women are just a target for predators, whether it's a sexual fantasy or that they are more easily kind of tricked into a car or tricked into doing the will of an older, more established man, an adult. For whatever reason, we've talked about this kind of dynamic in the Delphi cases a lot, where young girls may be used to listening to grown men, teachers, coaches, whatever, tell them to do things. And so they don't even question it. And of course, it often in these cases lead to their demise. Another very young girl, Colleen McMillan, was only 16 when she disappeared. Colleen left her home with the intention of hitchhiking along Highway 97 to visit some friends. A month later, her body was found off a logging road 46 kilometers south of where she was last seen. And the last time that she was seen was August 1974. The good thing about this case is it's officially solved. The bad thing is it's who we suspected may be responsible for several of these murders. In 2012, DNA found on her body was determined to have belonged to serial killer Bobby Jack Fowler.
Yeah, and Fowler is one of these serial killers, we're going to talk about him in a bit, but who just trolls these highways looking for victims. And look, you hear about things like human trafficking a lot. And a lot of times the focus of that, it will be on people who absolutely were not human trafficked. Human trafficking is not something that tends to target wealthy people driving Mercedes looking for toddlers wandering down the side of the interstate, right? That is not the kind of people who are targeted by traffickers. The people who are targeted by traffickers are people who are from groups that people don't care as much about, people who are runaways, people who are on drugs, people who are in bad situations who can disappear and people won't notice. Same thing with serial killers. They tend to look for people that when they commit these crimes, they are going to have a buffer of who knows how long, where nobody's going to be looking, where half the people looking just think they ran away. You're going to see that more and more where the police don't care as much. It's an unfortunate truth. And you see that again and again and again in these cases. And you certainly see it with this. And
so far, the victims that we've talked about, you may be thinking, well, okay, these women were doing risky behaviors. They were hitchhiking. They were going out to bars late at night, kind of, hunting grounds for predators. But the next case is just devastating because it is an example of childhood innocence ripped apart. Monica Jack disappeared in May of 1978, and she was only 12 years old. Monica was last seen riding her bike along Highway 5A, and she was returning home after a shopping trip to Merritt with a friend, but she never made it back home. 17 years later, in June of 1995, Monica's remains were found in a ravine off a logging road on Swackham Mountain, about 20 kilometers from where her bike had been discovered. And her case is solved. Gary Taylor Hanlon was convicted of her murder in January 2019, which in and of itself is incredible. That She wasn't found until 17 years later, but they were able to get a conviction, even though the case was so old and her remains were probably pretty decomposed at that point.
And look, I mean, evidence that's never too late. And you hear these cases and you think they're really old. How could we ever solve them? But it's never too late. And sometimes it's just one break you need. I think in her case, the break they needed was to find her body. And I think they probably found some evidence around that enabled them to actually find her killer. And it is a small, it's a small consolation, but it is one that, number one, her family had closure because she wasn't missing anymore. They found the body. And number two, justice was at least served.
And it shows you, look, she was found 17 years later. That was 1995. The killer wasn't convicted until 2019 because oftentimes maybe there was additional evidence that had to be processed. But this just shows you that political pressure to get these cases prosecuted will work because a prosecutor is going to be overwhelmed with crimes that they have to prosecute. And they're probably going to have the more pressing ones, at the top of mind, especially if victims' families or those who loved the victim are asking them to prosecute. It has an effect on you as a prosecutor because you are a human being and, you have ears and you can hear what people are saying to you. But this is so awesome that the prosecutor didn't just let the case go away. Even, 24 years later, after her body was found, they prosecuted the case and got a conviction. The next woman is Maureen Mosey, and she was 33 years old when she disappeared on May 8th, 1981. Maureen was last seen hitchhiking in the area of Salmon Arm on May 8th, 1981. Witnesses saw her getting into a car with a man described to be in his late 20s, early 30s, with a dark beard. Her body was found near Highway 97 the next day, and her case remains unsolved.
The next case we're going to talk about is Shelly-Ann Baskew. May 3rd, 1983. She was 16 years old. This is a case that actually I think you could do a lot with, and probably is one of those where if you wanted to dive into a case, this might be the one to do it with. Shelly-Ann was last seen walking home along Highway 16 in the direction of her home in Hinton. She spoke to her mother at 8 p.m. that evening to let her know she was heading home. She told her that a friend was going to pick her up from her boyfriend's brother's house and drive her back home. But Shelly never made it. And in fact, it doesn't appear she waited for the ride. She was seen walking down Highway 16 at 8:15, 4 miles from her home and destination. Her family knew she was missing by 9, but in the old police policy that was the serial killer's best friend, they were told they could not file a report until 24 hours had passed. A few days later, some of Shelly's personal belongings, including some of her clothing, her student union card, and a library book, were found along Highway 40 on the banks of the Athabasca River. It was only then that the police started treating her as endangered rather than a runaway. Shelly has never been found. Interesting thing about this case, it is unsolved, but there is unknown DNA found on her clothing that does not match anyone in the RCMP database or anyone known to her. And the police believe this DNA was her killer's. And this might be one of those cases where genetic genealogy could help solve this case. And I don't know if anybody in the genetic genealogy world is looking at this case, but it seems like one, to me, where if we really think we've got DNA, run it through the system, do the work, you might just crack the case.
Yeah, if you can't tell, we're many women into this list, and this is the first case where we actually have some good information that could lead somewhere.
And look, there's weirdness about this case. We've been talking about serial killers and stranger murders and everything else. The weird thing about this case is she's walking home 4 miles from her home. She's supposed to be getting a ride, but she doesn't. It's unclear. There's some weirdness there about exactly what was going on and what led to her walking in the first place. So I'm intrigued by this case. I wish they'd run the DNA. I think it'd be interesting to see what they found. So the next case is Alberta Williams. August 1989. Alberta was 24 years old. Alberta Williams disappeared after a night out at a bar in Prince Rupert. She was out with her sister and a group of friends celebrating the end of their seasonal jobs. Alberta's sister last saw her at closing time, but lost sight of her and eventually left without her. Some have reported that Alberta was last seen at a party at her uncle's house, and that he became evasive and uncooperative with the police after her body was found. Although this might seem like a strong lead, mistrust in the indigenous community against the RCMP runs high, and the uncle was not the only family member who refused to cooperate with the police once this investigation got going. And I think one possible reason for that is they didn't trust the police to actually look into this case and not try and pin it on one of them. And that is something that complicates all these investigations and is a hangover of what is an unfortunate relationship between the government in Canada and the First Nations. We have that in the United States as well. It is an ongoing problem we've talked about in other cases, and it makes these cases really hard to solve. Whenever you have communities that don't trust the police for whatever reason, whether justified or not, it is a huge roadblock for solving cases. In any event, Alberta's body was found 3 weeks later on September 25th, 1989, in a ditch off of Highway 16. Her body was found with only a blouse and a bra on, and there was evidence of a violent struggle. In this case, remains unsolved. The next case is Delphine Nicole. June 14th, 1990. She was 16 years old. Delphine was last seen hitchhiking home along Highway 16 between Smithers and Telqua after a day out shopping with friends. Witnesses described seeing Delphine get into a car, but she was never seen again, and her body has never been found. Ramona Wilson, June 11th, 1994. She was only 16 years old at the time of her disappearance. Ramona left her house around 9:45 p.m. one June evening to meet a friend at a dance in Hazleton. Ramona never made it to the dance and was never seen alive again. On April 9th, 1995, Ramona's remains were discovered near the Smithers Airport on Highway 16. A yellow rope and nylon cables were found next to her body. Her clothing was nearby, but her shoes were never found, and that makes you wonder if whoever killed her took them as a trophy. But we don't know because this case is unsolved.
And it really strikes me, these last couple victims, how little information we know about them. And they're from the 90s. So at least to me, the 90s don't seem that long ago. And it is so sad, especially kind of in the true crime podcast environment that we are in today, how we have so many people who are able to, look into cases and have so much more information talking to people who knew the people at the time. As time goes by, 30 years, 40 years pass by, anyone who may have known something their memories fade or they die and they're no longer around to be able to give their accounts. And that just makes me so sad about these last couple of cases with so little information, because there's probably still someone out there who remembers something, but time is slipping by.
The next case is Roxanne Thierra. July 1994. She was only 15 years old. One weekend in July 1994, Roxanne, who was a sex worker at the time in the United States, if you're 15 years old, that is child sex trafficking. There's no such thing as a child sex worker, but in any event, she was a sex worker. And she told a friend that she was meeting a client in downtown Prince George. She was last seen walking around the corner of a building and then never seen again. The next month, Roxanne's body was discovered in a bush along Highway 16 right outside of the town of Burns Lake. And her murder, like so many of these, remains unsolved.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Instacart is on a mission to have you not leave the couch this basketball season, because between the pregame rituals and the postgame interviews, it can be difficult to find time for everything else. So let Instacart take care of your game day snacks or weekly restocks and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes, because we hear it's bad luck to be hungry on game day. So download the Instacart app today and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days. Excludes restaurants.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Slightly different than the others in that she wasn't, it doesn't appear that she was hitchhiking or walking on Highway 16, but this just shows you the problem with Highway 16. This is where her killer decided to dump her body, even though likely they picked her up somewhere else, because of the remoteness of Highway 16, because of kind of the fact that there are ever witnesses who see any of these women get into cars, I think is a miracle, because that's all we have to go on. But it is relatively remote, and the chances of someone seeing you, because you're probably going fast on a highway, you're usually not going at a crawling space, to be able to see, be able to remember details is slim. And someone who dumped her there knows that. They know that even though it's a interstate, there's going to be a lot of people driving by quickly without taking in any of the facts around them. And you see, it worked in this instance because her case remains unsolved. The next woman is Alicia Germain. December 9th, 1994, she was just 15 years old. And that day, Alicia, who had left home, was living on the streets at the time of her disappearance. She was attending a Christmas party at the Prince George Native Friendship Center on the evening she was last seen. One of the workers recalled Alicia saying she was going to leave with her cousin but would be back and to save her gift. However, she did not return to the party that evening and was last seen on a sidewalk downtown. That very same evening, Alicia was found stabbed to death at an elementary school along Highway 16. And her case is still unsolved, but interestingly, an unknown female's DNA was found at the crime scene. Police also say they have a suspect, though they do not have enough evidence to move forward at this time.
So this is another case to focus on, particularly if you're in the area, because it sounds like they're one step away from solving it. And the fact there's unknown female DNA, it makes you wonder if this is some local beef that maybe she had with somebody else that she knew. This one's a little different. It doesn't seem like it was a sexual assault. She wasn't strangled. She was stabbed to death. Her body was found the next day, granted, along Highway 16, but this one seems like it should have been solved. I don't know. I just wonder whether
at an
this
elementary
is a stranger.
school
Yeah.
too. You know, like there's going to be a parking lot. There might be security cameras. It's going to probably be well lit if there's going to be any place on Highway 16 lit. So this definitely does smell different than the other cases, but it sounds like if somebody knows something from that night, because she was seen by several witnesses throughout the night, it could really be the code to crack it. Because if someone can remember her walking with someone, maybe getting into a fight with someone, maybe meeting up with someone, that could be the crack in the case that the police need. The next victim is Lana Derrick, and she was 19 when she first disappeared on October 7th, 1995. Lana was last seen at a gas station, and at around 3 a.m., Lana knocked on the door of the apartment that she was sharing with her sister. Lana got $30 that her father had sent her to collect and told her she was going to a party. She invited her sister, but her sister declined the invitation to go to the party. And according to a witness, Lana got into a blue car with two men at around 3:30 a.m. before driving off north along Highway 16. Lana was never heard from again, and her remains have never been found, and her case is unsolved. The next woman is Nicole Hoare, and she was 25 years old in June of 2002 when Nicole, who was a tree planter working in Prince George at the time of her disappearance, was last seen hiking along Highway 16 from Prince George to Smithers. She has not been seen since, and her remains have never been found. Nicole's disappearance sparked some controversy with indigenous groups in the area. Nicole, who was a white woman, received far more media attention and investigative efforts than many of the indigenous women who had also gone missing in this same area. Project EPANA was not launched until after Nicole's disappearance, and she disappeared on June 21st, 2002. And this caused further speculation of racism within law enforcement and the Canadian government as a whole. And here's the thing, whether that is true or not, whether EPANA was launched because a white woman disappeared rather than another indigenous woman, we won't know. Thank goodness EPANA was at least launched, and now there is attention on this. And this comes to a critique we often hear, right? Oh, this victim is only getting nationwide media coverage or international media coverage because they fit a certain profile. They're blonde hair, they're blue eyes, they're white, they're, well-to-do, what have you. The solution, I think, is not to drag down the attention that we have for any victim. Hopefully what we do is to give that type of attention that we give to the beautiful blue-eyed, blonde-haired, prom princess to all victims, especially the more vulnerable victims who may not have people going out with, missing signs for them. They should be extended to all of the women we've been talking about today. So I hope that, when you see that type of criticism, it's not to diminish the attention on the victim who's getting it, but that type of attention should be extended to especially vulnerable victims.
No, I agree 100%. Whatever led them to launch EPANA is a good thing. I'm glad they did it. And yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that historically a lot of these murders have not gotten as much attention because of who the victims were, but I think you're seeing that change. The next name, Tamara Chipman, September 21st, 2005. She was 22 at the time of her murder. Tamara was last seen hitchhiking along Highway 16 in the area of Prince Rupert. Because Tamara was splitting time between her parents' home and her father was a fisherman who would be gone for long stretches of time, it would be months before Tamara was reported missing to police. She is still missing, and her remains have never been found. But we have a pretty good idea that she was murdered because the police think they know what happened to her. At some point, a witness came forward and explained that Tamara had hitchhiked with her and 2 other men. While they were hitchhiking, they got into an argument. One of the men killed Tamara, and they dumped her body in the woods. Later on, one of the men came back and moved her body deeper into the woods in the hopes it would never be found. The witness took the police and cadaver dogs to the area. They didn't find anything, and unfortunately now both of the men and the witness are dead, and it makes you wonder, unless some hunter or hiker or blueberry picker finds her body, this is a case that likely will never be solved, though at least I think we know what probably happened to her.
Kind of on that note of blueberry picking, because I know one of the victims was found by blueberry picking. Have you ever gone blueberry picking, like in the wild, not at a...
Only
not
with
like
you,
one of the times
Alice.
I've made you go to a blueberry picking farm?
Only with you.
So I can absolutely see how blueberry picking can have you stumble upon these, because I have gone blueberry picking like on the side of a highway. That's typically where they grow very well because it's a wild plant like blackberries, and it's a very thick, dense brush with like a lot of prickles on it. Like, it does not feel good to walk through it, and they can get very high, well above your head. And when the leaves are all very dense and the berries are all very dense, you have to like really get in there to pick. Like, there's the low-hanging fruit, but if you really want a lot of blueberries, you go into the bush and you're basically like enveloped by the bush, and you're picking blueberries within the blueberry bush. And I can see that is the instance where you may be able to stumble on a body that has been hidden well in the brush, because there probably wouldn't be other instances where you'd be in the middle of the brush. So, blueberry pickers, you might be doing a service for victims who have been stashed away, but also, like, be aware.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's the same reason, hunters are often the people who stumble upon these. So the last person who is on the list is Ayla Sarek Auger, and she disappeared on February 2nd, 2006, and she was only 14 years old. She was last seen partying with her sister and friends after spending the day at the Pine Center Mall in Prince George. Her and her sister were separated at some point in the evening, so it's not clear exactly when Ayla disappeared, but she never returned home after the evening out. 8 days later, her body was discovered in a ditch off of Highway 16, approximately 23 kilometers away from Prince George, and her murder is unsolved. And this just goes back to something Alice said. The fact that people are murdering people and then they feel comfortable dumping these bodies off of the highway tells you something about the highway and how it's perceived. Now look, there are many additional cases of missing and murdered women that don't fit the criteria for Project EPANA. As we said, that's one of the criticisms of it. And so I'm going to read you some names here. 18 additional women that many groups in the area also suspect are victims of the Highway of Tears. And this list is not exhaustive, and there's really no telling how many women have fallen victim to predators in this area. Helen Frost, 1971, is still missing. Virginia Sampar, 1971, still missing. Mary Jane Hill, 1978, she was murdered. Cecilia Nicole, 1989, still missing. The Jack family, which is an entire family of people, in 1989, still missing. We're actually going to look into that case a little bit more because I'm really sort of stunned that an entire family could go missing. And we're going to see if we can find out more about that one, because that immediately jumped out to me. Deanna Brame, 1999, murdered. Kayla Rose McKay, 2004, murdered. Margaret Newski, 2004, missing. Mary Madeline George, 2005, missing. Bonnie Marie Joseph, 2007, missing. Emily Rose McLean, 2010, murdered. Madison Scott, 2011, missing. Immaculate Basil, 2013, missing. Anita Florence Thorne, 2014, missing. Frances Brown, 2017, missing. Chantel Catherine Simpson, 2018, murdered. Jessica Patrick Balazar, 2018, missing. Cynthia Martin, 2018, missing. So those are just some of the names of people that may be connected to this, that while not in Project EPANA, are names of people who met a terrible fate on this highway.
And having heard at least some of the details of what happened to the women in the EPANA project, what happened to them, I think it's pretty clear that we have more than one killer. But obviously, when you have this many women who are turning up murdered or are missing along a region, your first thought is going to go to serial killer. And we've already mentioned one of them, so let's talk about some serial killer connections. Bobby Jack Fowler, who we've already mentioned as suspects in a couple of the cases and was convicted of one of the murders. He was a rapist and suspected serial killer who committed countless crimes throughout the United States and Canada from the 1960s to the 1990s. Very prolific, very long time. Fowler was born in Texas, but his job as a construction worker allowed him to live a transient lifestyle, traveling all across North America. During his travels, Fowler was known to frequent bars and motels and often picked up hitchhikers. We've already heard a lot of themes of our victims: hitchhiking, night out at bars, being alone near the highway. In January of 1996, Fowler was convicted of kidnapping in the first degree, attempted rape in the first degree, sexual abuse in the first degree, coercion, assault in the fourth degree, and menacing. Basically everything they could throw at him. And he was sentenced to 16 years in prison, which doesn't seem that long for all the things that he has done. But this conviction was related to an incident in Newport, Oregon, not one of these Highway of Tears cases. The Newport, Oregon case involved a woman jumping out of a Tides Inn motel window with a rope tied to her ankle. And that's what he was convicted for. And he only got 16 years.
Let me just say this. I fully support sentencing reform as long as it includes vastly increasing the sentences for certain crimes. Because there are certain crimes that are so indicative of somebody who is a person who should never walk free again. This is one of them. If you have a woman that you have kidnapped and you are raping and you have tied up in a hotel room, you should go to prison forever and never get out.
You don't start there.
Exactly.
You don't start there. That is what you do. That is your MO.
Right. And most people who do something like that have either killed before or will kill in the future. And it blows my mind that you can do all that and get 16 years in prison, which probably, if it's state prison, lucky if you serve 8. I mean, I don't know. Just the way we do sentencing in this country is just blows my mind. And unfortunately, I feel like the reform efforts are completely wrong because typically, because there are certain sentencing disparities, people, when they do reform, they want to lower everything. No, that is wrong. That is wrong. You need to take a look at these kind of crimes.
Not for these violent crimes.
Yeah, and consider just, I'm sorry, like, as I've said many times, you can reform yourself and become a great community leader in prison. And that is something that should have been the only opportunity this guy ever had. Now, it didn't end up mattering with him because he will die in prison, fortunately. But
I guess that's like some, justice.
If he had gotten
nature.
out, he would have killed more people. There is no question about that.
Which I think he did, that he's not even convicted for. And so, like Brett said, he did die in prison of lung cancer, of all things, in 2006 without ever being convicted of a single murder. So, however, he is considered a suspect or person of interest in at least 16 murders in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. And he wasn't convicted of a single one. Like, death was actually his way out, right? I mean, and I feel so badly for all of those victims' families who never got justice, that you don't go to trial when someone dies. There's just no more prosecution against him. But 16 murders, at least, probably more if he was that prolific because he was active for so long as well. My only thought is maybe he smoked like a cigarette every time he murdered someone, and somehow justice had it that those cigarettes were the ones that killed him from the lung cancer, so that there was still justice for those victims, is the story I'm telling myself. In 2012, the RCMP named Fowler as a suspect of 3 of the Highway of Tears murders: Colleen McMillan, Gail Ways, and Pamela Darlington. These women were murdered between 1973 and 1974 when Fowler was known to be in Prince George, working at a local roofing company. Fowler's DNA was found on Colleen McMillan's body, but the connection was not made until after Fowler had died, so he was not charged with her murder. While the RCMP has only publicly named these 3 women as likely victims of Fowler, they believe he could have murdered anywhere from 10 to 20 women along the Highway of Tears. Oh my goodness. He's also suspected in the murders of 4 young women in Oregon during the early mid-90s. Again, what Brett said, some people should never leave prison. And if he were caught earlier on, like, why did he have access for 30 years to murder dozens of people? He's not someone who was like shy about it. He didn't murder one person and then lie in wait for his next kill. He just killed all the time for the thrill.
Yeah. Bad guy. Glad he's dead. Wish he'd died earlier. But some people are just, I don't know. And he's not the only one, unfortunately. There's Cody Legabokoff, who is a Canadian serial killer who was convicted of 4 murders, which occurred between 2009 and 2010. Cody, who was only 19 at the time of his arrest, was spotted by an RCMP rookie driving his black pickup truck quickly and erratically off of a logging road along Highway 27. When the officer pulled him over, he was covered in blood. Not a good sign. And had a small backpack with him that did not look like it would belong to the 6'2", 220-pound man. He claimed he had just clubbed a deer to death, which, I don't know. I know a lot of hunters. Been hunting a couple times. Never killed anything. Don't know too many people who club deer to death. And obviously, law enforcement didn't buy that story. And they went on to investigate the logging road where he was spotted. There, they found a body of a young girl, Lauren Dawn Leslie, who was only 15 years old. She had been sexually assaulted, had massive trauma to her head, and multiple stab wounds to her neck. Shortly following his arrest for Lauren's murder, Cody was linked to 3 other murders in the area via DNA evidence. And once again, 19 years old. He was connected to Jill Stachenko, a 35-year-old mother of 5 who was found murdered with her body left in a gravel pit in Prince George in October 2009. DNA on Jill's body was a match to Cody. The body of a 35-year-old Cynthia Moss was found in October 2010 in a park in Prince George. She had died of blunt force trauma to her head as well as stab wounds. She had a broken jaw and a cheekbone, a hole in her shoulder blade, and injuries to her neck consistent with someone stomping on it. Cynthia's DNA was discovered on a sweater and sock found in Cody's truck, as well as a pickaxe and a pair of shoes in his apartment. Natasha Montgomery went missing in early September 2010, though her body has never been found. She was linked to Cody when blood was found on an axe in his home, which was a match to her. Additionally, her blood was found on the shorts Cody was wearing the night he murdered Lauren. On September
Goodness, he was so violent.
Yes.
Like, so incredibly violent for such a young person.
Yeah, I don't know what went wrong in his life, but on September 16th, 2014, Cody Legabokoff was sentenced to, and if you needed an argument for sentencing reform in Canada, this person who brutally murdered 3 people was sentenced to life in prison with no parole, which sounds good, for 25 years. So after 25 years, this person who murdered multiple people will be eligible for parole. I hope that the good people of the Canadian Parole Board will understand that this person should never be released. But why you would ever have a sentencing regime that would allow someone like this to walk free blows my mind. And I don't understand what we're doing here. The guy should be at least be in prison for the rest of his life.
And by the way, in 25 years, he would barely be 50 years old. In other words, like, still the prime of your life, still very violent, still very sexually charged and able to do a lot of harm to a lot of people. It's not like he's coming out of prison, a 98-year-old who can't walk, unassisted. 50 is, especially if all you're doing for 25 years is working out, you're going to be ready to hunt again.
And we know that none of the murders we mentioned are murders that we've gone over, but they all happened in the immediate area of the Highway of Tears, and many people suspect that him hunting that area is not unlikely, and that the murders we know about are not his only murders.
Frankly, it just seems like this stretch was so dangerous that if you didn't get killed by one serial killer, there was another one prowling for you. And that's the point here, right? Is there weren't other options for these women. Like, they wanted to go out. A lot of them were young, and so they may not have thought that the danger could have come to them. Even though a lot of these women were found at the time, it's not like nobody knew that this was the dumping ground or a very dangerous stretch of road. It was like there's no other options. So what's being done now? Many indigenous groups in the area have long been critical of law enforcement's response to the situation along Highway 16. These disappearances and murders went largely ignored for nearly 40 years, leaving many people to wonder if prejudice against Native women kept the police from acting. Police often assumed these disappearances were related to the victim's high-risk lifestyle. But honestly, looking at that list of victims, maybe a couple of them and the high-risk part is probably just the hitchhiking part rather than their lifestyle, which is really difficult because when your life circumstances make it that you have to hitchhike rather than, say, you choose a certain line of work or you're using substances that impair you and make you a more vulnerable target, that I could maybe understand of why that would be labeled high risk, but simply because of lack of resources and therefore needing to hitchhike seems like a stretch to call that high risk. Nevertheless, it's left many families to feel as if law enforcement was victim blaming rather than investigating. And on more than one occasion, police told families to wait 24 hours or even days before filing a report. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference in these cases, but maybe that person could have been found, or maybe if these predators knew that within an hour, if family members knew someone was missing, the police forces were going to be out hunting for them, it makes it a lot riskier to have these be your hunting grounds. But when you know you can get anywhere scot-free without anyone being reported missing for 24 hours or days, it becomes a very less risky endeavor to hunt on these grounds. So as a result, the Highway of Tears Symposium was established in 2006. And this symposium served as a collective and unifying voice for the victims' families and the community. This symposium made 33 recommendations in the following areas: victim prevention, emergency planning and team response, victim family counseling and support, community development and support. And though it initially seemed as if little to no action was taken in response to these recommendations, in August of 2016, the federal government launched the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, and they put some teeth behind it. In doing so, it wasn't just an announcement. They actually named 5 commissioners, and they committed $53.9 million over 2 years to this initiative, with the goal of producing recommendations on concrete actions to address the disproportionately high rate of violence toward Indigenous women and girls in Canada. At least it's a step forward, especially when you're putting money behind words. Things tend to happen. Is it enough? Is it too late? I say it's never too late, because we have found, there can still be justice even for these very old cases. And hopefully what it's going to do is to stem the tide of all of these murders. Let these predators know we're watching now. This is not just your hunting ground. We are standing up for our community.
And look, what's interesting about it is there are, the simplistic way of looking at it is, well, tell the women to stop hitchhiking, and we should start really cracking down on people who are violent predators, which we should do. You can say that, but as Alice pointed out, easy to say when you're not somebody who doesn't have any way to get from one place to another. And obviously, of course, we should be cracking down on violent predators, but what are we going to do in the interim? And there's some interesting things that happened to make this area, basically to make it harder for people to murder people there, which, unfortunately, murderers are always going to be with us. But if you can make it harder for them to do their thing, maybe there will be fewer murders. And you've seen some of that.
There's a reason, for example, there are floodlights in high crime areas, right? Like, a light can actually do a lot to deter crimes. And so sometimes if you just make hay and let people know we're looking, that can be enough to deter some, not all, but some.
And that's really been the approach. In 2017, BC Transit added 3 bus routes along Highway 16 in an effort to provide some access to safe transportation and to minimize the need for hitchhiking. The new routes service the areas of Smithers, Morristown, Burns Lake, and Prince George. Now, this is somewhat offset by Greyhound's decision to stop servicing the area in 2018, but I don't know how much people were using Greyhound for the more sort of short-term trips. I mean, look, a lot of these people were literally hitchhiking a few miles. We talked about that, the one girl she was only 4 miles from home. That's a long way to walk. It's a short bus trip, and it's one hitchhike, right? And going all the way back to when we talked about Moore Murray, and we talked about, what are the chances she got picked up by some random murderer? Well, on this highway, that happened all the time. A lot of women were hitchhiking. They were going one stop. They were literally going to get in one car, drive a couple miles, and get out. And the car they got into was the car of a murderer. And these bus routes are providing at least some option. The other thing they did, and it is, this tells you how remote this area is. In 2021, only 2 years ago, the Canadian government was finally able to provide cell phone service along the Highway of Tears. The government and Rogers Communication teamed up to provide 12 cell phone towers along Highway 16 between Prince Rupert and Morristown. And the hope is that this increased cell coverage will allow travelers, these young women, to let loved ones know they are safe, to look up directions, to call for a ride, to call for help in the event of an emergency, and frankly, just make it so that the average murderer driving down the road knows this person might be able to call for help. For until 2021, somebody who was looking to kill somebody could drive down that road safe in the knowledge that there was no help coming and there was no way for this person to seek help. Look, many people in this area, including a lot of the First Nations, the indigenous groups, they're happy with the work that's been done. It's frustrating that it took so long, and it has taken a long time just to have these very minor improvements to safety in the area. We can hope that the rate of murders and disappearance will fall off, and we can hope that some of these unsolved murders will be solved. But I think this stretch of highway is going to have a pretty dark reputation for a very long time. So that was the dark one, Alice. That one was depressing. Important to do, but very depressing.
And here's the thing. There are so many interstates, like we said at the beginning, that are like this one. Interstates are often through lots of remote areas. There's a reason why there was no cell phone service here until 2 years ago, right? It's because not a lot of people live here. It's not well traveled. Another hope for having these bus stops is that the women will take the bus, but also that there's more traffic at odd hours of the night. It's a lot riskier when you know that this bus route, there's going to be a bus coming here every even hour. That's much more different than, they're not going to be reported for 24 hours or days. And so just having that increased traffic in a very rural place hopefully can make a difference. But the reality is this continues to be a remote area. It continues to be a place where things are just far enough away, just a few miles. I can kind of walk it, but geez, it would just take a couple minutes if I could catch a ride with someone. That calculus is still there for people to make that snap decision and say, let me just get in this car. And I think education will help, and also to recognize that this is not just a special place on the Highway of Tears. You're going to see this all over Canada. You're going to see this all over the United States in similar types of areas. And I don't know what the answer is. I wish, humanity weren't depraved and murder wasn't a thing, but it certainly is. And so make sure that you know the steps that you can take to protect yourself, and that the young women in your life know how to protect themselves. Don't take these activities that are what the police have labeled as risk-loving. You may not know when you're 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, when you're just thinking, I'm just going a couple miles down the road. Nothing bad is going to happen. So, as your mom, if you're listening out there and you don't know this, don't hitchhike. Don't pull a Brett. Don't pick up a hitchhiker either.
Yeah, that's good advice. And look, I think one of the things, and I feel like this is being addressed more and more, but whoever you are, we have all the technology in the world. It's advancing every day. It's making it easier to solve crimes. But if the police, the investigating agencies, and the public don't care about the victims, it won't matter. If nobody's looking, they're not going to find people who go missing. And if nobody's really investigating, they're not going to find the DNA on the inside of the shirt or whatever that solves the crime. And who the group is that no one cares about changes, and it depends on where you are. But unfortunately, pretty much everywhere, there's always some group of people that people care about less. And that's just the way it is. And I think acknowledging that, figuring out who it is, and putting pressure on people who can make a difference to not do that is important. And this group of people in this area of Canada for a very long time were just people that people didn't really look for. The List case was one of the reasons it took so long to find him was because when it started, nobody really cared about those girls who were on Backpage and Craigslist engaged in sex work. And they didn't look for them, and they said, they're probably just runaways. They're probably just drug addicts. And they didn't look for them, so they didn't find them. And when they did find them, it was so long that it's a miracle they solved the case. And look, I think people ask, is it even possible to be a serial killer anymore because of technology? Well, if you're somebody like the idiot in Idaho who's killing 4 college students, no, he was never going to become a serial killer because the focus on that case was immense. But if you look at some of the serial killers who are operating today, who aren't found, they tend to focus on people that nobody will notice when they're missing.
Absolutely. And I think Brett and I see this a lot in things like the child pornography or child sexual assault cases. There are always going to be vulnerable populations. Those cases, unfortunately, are rampant. I wish that were not the case. We've said this before, like, hide your kids, y'all. Like, know where your kids are. And that has given me an insight into how, yes, absolutely, predators are among us. They will continue to be among us, and they will continue to have vulnerable populations they can prey on. But you can shed light on them. Podcasts can shed light on those populations and make them less vulnerable just by virtue of shining a light on who they are and all of you talking about them and not just focusing on the, one case that perhaps everyone's talking about. And this is why, there's certain amount of bandwidth in people's time in podcasts and documentaries of who you decide to cover, and who you decide to cover can be very important.
I think we definitely need some questions tonight, Alice, because this has been a very heavy episode. Like I said, an important episode. I'm glad we did it. We're going to try to do more of these where we talk about multiple cases, because one thing we've run into is people will suggest cases to us, and they're cases that it feels like should be talked about, but you can't do a podcast unless your podcast is 10 minutes long. You can't do an episode on them because there's nothing out there unless you can do an investigative podcast.
Maybe we'll call them like spotlight episodes.
Yeah, there you go. And Madison,
Searchlight.
is really good at these and is fired up about these cases. So I'm really happy to have her because she helps us. And the hope is with Madison on board, things like the Adnan case, it's really hard to do Adnan while doing the podcast because you got to be producing episodes while doing something that's going to take forever. So we're hoping that we can do more different things while also doing big cases. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, review questions. Okay, I feel like this is one we need. Chrissy from South Carolina. I feel like we need comfort food right now, Alice. What is your favorite comfort food or meal?
Comfort food. I love, this is going to be very Southern, but I love sausage and gravy on biscuits. Like if you're having a bad day, you just can't have it with like a very just like perfectly baked, flaky buttermilk biscuit cut open.
I love it.
And you like have the white gravy with the crumpled sausage inside, and they're like, would you like it smothered? The answer is yes, smother it. And you can't eat it with your hands because it's so smothered. You have to eat it with a fork and scoop it up. You gotta like scoop it up, and then you have your sausage on the side that you like scoop up the rest of the gravy into your mouth to make sure all the gravy is eaten.
My mom used to make biscuits and gravy, and it was amazing. But, Hardee's and Jack's have great biscuits and gravy, just like you're describing. And it is very much a sort of comfort food type thing. Not healthy,
Not how, and you know what's great about that particular comfort food? A lot of fast food or restaurant food is going to be inferior to the home cooked version. Somehow biscuits and gravy, doesn't matter where you get it. It's always going to be really good because it's just how much butter you put into it.
In the South, the fast food restaurants make pretty darn good biscuits. They really do.
Great.
You really do. And I miss biscuits and gravy. I remember when I moved to Boston, that was something I missed. Sweet tea and biscuits and gravy. And there was this one place in Cambridge called like Cotton Eye Joe's or something. They eventually turned into an Irish restaurant or an Irish bar, which sucked. But for a little while, they were a country place. And you could go there and get sweet tea and biscuits and gravy, and I would go there and get it all the time because I miss that so much. But, okay, comfort food. I'll do two. I'll do one that I just like to eat, and then one that has sort of... So, the emotional one, I've talked about this before, how my mom would mail me pound cakes.
Oh, yeah.
And regular pound cakes and chocolate pound cakes, both of which are great. I should tell her this about like how much I love those pound cakes. And, when I was up in Boston, it meant a lot to me to get these pound cakes, get a box from my mom, and it was a pound cake. Man, I would just eat that thing. And it was so good. Pound cakes are really good. If you've never had a pound cake, try it. And then sort of just a generalized comfort food, I love mashed potatoes and gravy. Mashed potatoes and gravy. Going back to your gravy thing. I really love all kinds of potatoes. French fries, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes with gravy.
Tater tots.
Tater tots.
Oh,
hash
tater tots
browns.
are great. I was actually about to say mashed potatoes, and then I was like,
it's so good, though.
It is so good.
It's so good.
Man. Okay, so when let's see, have I made you my truffle butter, half sweet potato, half golden potato mashed potato? Okay, you're going to have to come over for that.
That sounds amazing.
We went to this incredible restaurant in Mobile on the Gulf, and it was like, we're tired parents, so we had dinner at like 4:30. It was like completely booked up for the night, but they were like, if you show up at 4:30, you can eat basically with the staff. And we're like, we will take it. And so we went, and they had this, like, the waiter was like, you have to get these mashed potatoes. And I was like, mashed potatoes at this, like, really nice restaurant? Shouldn't we get seafood or something? And he's like, just get the mashed potatoes. And it was like it was just like heaven in my mouth. And I was like, you have to tell me what's like in this. Like, I know you can't tell me the recipe, but you have to tell me, like, what are the ingredients? Because I've never tasted anything like this. So he told me the 3 ingredients, and there's other stuff too. So I've been like messing with it for the last year, and I think I've gotten as close as I can, at least a version of it that I love.
Sounds like a recipe you should put up on Process Cookies.
Probably should.
Cooking Facebook group.
But golden potatoes is the key. Golden potatoes are so good they like soak up the flavors.
Making me hungry. It's late. I want to go get myself potatoes.
I am a little bit hungry now too. I didn't eat tonight because I was thrown up on, remember?
See, I ate bacon and sausage tonight. That was my dinner. And an egg. So
look at that breakfast. The breakfast,
yeah. It's always good. Okay. One last question, and then we'll let you go. This is from Jamie Time. Are your respective spouses lawyers, and do your kiddos know you're kind of famous?
You go first, because we waved to your daughter tonight.
We did. Number one, it's like definitely pod famous, which is kind of
which is not famous.
But yeah, my daughter likes to watch us on television. She doesn't know and listen to, and she always asks me if I'm going upstairs to talk to Miss Alice when she's getting ready to go to bed.
Aww.
So I have to say yes, and then yes, my wife is a lawyer, because what else would she be?
Yeah, my spouse is an attorney, of course. There's just this whole pod family is very attorney heavy, and my kids don't listen to the podcast because there's like a lot of murder and stuff. So they're like of the age where they understand things. No, it's just my kids are a little bit older and they understand, and they also go to school and repeat things that we say all the time. And I'm like, oh, like the whole, don't be dramatic, mother. And so they don't listen to the podcast, but they listen to the song. So they know the song. And once in a while, they'll get in the car and my phone automatically starts playing like our podcast. And my son will always go, why are you in the radio? That's hilarious. As famous as you get. So it keeps you real humble.
Yeah. Well, look, if you enjoy those questions and you want to ask one, if you'll leave a 5-star review on Apple, either for the prosecutors or the prosecutors' legal briefs, and leave a question, we will happily answer it for you in some future episode. And someone mentioned Android users. It is true. It is hard to leave an Apple review on Android, but it is possible. I'm an Android user. I have no Apple products, and I have left 5-star reviews, not for our podcast, but for other podcasts on Apple. So you can do it too. And there's also Spotify. And I don't really look at Spotify as much because I'm always looking at Apple to see where the questions are. But if you leave a 5-star review on Spotify, just email me the question, prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Give me a screenshot of your 5-star review, and that's good enough. And to the people leaving 1-star reviews and complaining about the fact that you have to leave a 5-star review to leave a question, sorry, your question's not getting answered. So, sucks for you. Thank you to everyone on Patreon who supports the show, especially to the 100 of you who are watching as we recorded this tonight, and to the rest of you who will receive it early and ad-free, and of course can watch this recording at any time. But thank you to everyone out there who listens to the show and support it. We love all of you. If you go to prosecutorspodcast.com, Madison is really good at citing her sources, and we'll be listing them all there. So if you want to read more about the Highway of Tears and some of the crimes that we mentioned and the victims that we talked about, do so. And as I said, if one of these cases has really struck you and you want to look into it more, please do so. And if you find out any information, who knows, maybe we can focus an entire episode on one of these cases in the future. Keep sending us your request. Madison has now started a file of requests that we're getting from everybody, which is a much more efficient way of doing it than the way I did it. Madison is a blessing. We love Madison. She's great. So thank you to all of you. Alice, is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
No, thank you guys for listening to this episode and for speaking up for victims and having great dialogue about this. I really look forward to your thoughts about these cases and what more we could do for cases that might be very old and there might not be very much information publicly about them. It's absolutely true. We'll be back next week with a new case, new questions, and maybe some new answers. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors. Good job, Alice.
I had to do it for them.
You did, yes.
Because they had to sit through an hour and a half of us rambling.
Were we rambling? Was that what we were doing? I thought we were recording a podcast.
We were not rambling.
Okay.
Okay, to answer those questions, yeah, gummy bears are absolutely up there, but I wouldn't call that a comfort food because it's like a everyday snack. Yeah, I feel like it has to be a comfort food. It can only be a comfort food if like you don't eat it all the time.
It's true. It's true. Plus, I don't think a candy is comfort food. I don't know. Maybe it is.
It's so bad. I cannot open a bag of gummy bears and not polish it off. It's a problem. Like, I should only get child-size ones.
Yeah. I'm somebody, I have no self-restraint. Like, I either have to give it up altogether, or I'm just going to eat all of it. Like, I cannot eat gummy bears. I cannot eat sugar.
You know what makes every outfit look better? The right bra from Third Love. Their bras make it easy to ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or even stop your shirt buttons from pulling. They make over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, so you'll find your perfect fit. Third Love solves bra problems, or what they call broblems. Real women test every style they make. Comfort and support are guaranteed. So stop settling for bad bras. You deserve better. Get your problem solved today. Save $15 on your first order with code podcast15 at thirdlove.com.
See what hit blockbusters are streaming free this month during Popcorn Summer Movies on PlutoTV. Watch Django Unchained or Transformers Dark of the Moon for an action-packed evening, or The Truman Show and School of Rock for a good laugh with the whole family. Plus, Pluto TV has thousands of other free movies available on live and on demand. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices for free and start streaming now.